Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Around the time that the great Imam Al-Kasani Rahimahullah was living, there was another famous Imam that had been born not too far from where Imam Al-Kasani Rahimahullah himself had come from. This Imam went on to become even more famous and affected much of the Muslim world up to the present day. That Imam's name was Burhanuddin Ali ibn Abi Bakr ibn Abdul Jalil Al-Farghani Al-Margheenaani, but we know him better as Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah. Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah was born in the year 530 after Hijrah, though some have said that he was born earlier in the year 511 after Hijrah. Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah was born in the village of Rishdan, which is known today as Rishtan. It's located in the city of Margheenan in the Farghana region of eastern Uzbekistan, near to the mouth of the famous trade route known as the Silk Road that used to link the east and the west. One thing about Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah that isn't so well known is the fact that he is actually of Arab descent. His forefathers had settled in Margheenan, but he actually traces his lineage back to Hazrat Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah started his studies at a young age, and his studies took him to the city of Samarkand, which was a major city of knowledge that produced thousands of ulama. It was in Samarkand that Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah ended up spending most of his life, as both his studies and then later his teaching was done in this city. Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah studied under some of the great luminaries of the time, the most famous of whom was the great Imam An-Nasafi Rahimahullah. Now anyone that has studied Aqidah would have come across the kitab of Imam An-Nasafi Rahimahullah, which is known as Al-Aqaid, or they would have come across the explanation of it by Imam At-Taftazani Rahimahullah, which is known as Sharh Al-Aqaid. So it was under this giant of knowledge and many others that Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah did his studies, and he reached such a high level of knowledge that he became a beacon of guidance for the world. People may know Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah for his works of fiqh, but besides being a faqih, he was also a mufassir of the Quran. He was a muhaddith in his own right. He was a master of usul al-fiqh, not to mention the fact that he was a linguist and a poet too. Such was his knowledge that the ulama used to say that you would not see another person like him with your eyes. That's how one of a kind Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah was. When Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah was studying in Samarkand, the kitab that no one could do without was the Mukhtasar of Imam Al-Quduri Rahimahullah. Every single person that was studying the deen would inevitably study Quduri. That was how widespread and accepted the kitab was. Second to Quduri, that everyone, young and old, would study was Al-Jami' al-Saghir of Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani Rahimahullah. It was because of these two kitabs that Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah decided to write his own kitab based on it, wherein he would amalgamate the two kitabs into one, without adding anything extra except where it was needed. After completing this kitab, Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah named it Bidayatul Mubtadi, which means the beginning of the beginner, because it was written as a primer that could be used to have the simple rulings from both kitabs without duplication, easily at hand in one simple volume. With Bidayatul Mubtadi now complete, Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah decided to expand upon the rulings contained within the kitab. So he began writing an explanation on his own kitab, and upon completion, he named this kitab Kifayatul Muntaha, which translates roughly as the sufficiency to the highest degree. And the reason for this name is because while the original Bidayatul Mubtadi was only one volume, the explanation of it, known as Kifayatul Muntaha, was a massive 80 volumes in size. So the name chosen for it really had befitted the kitab itself. After having completed Kifayatul Muntaha and seeing how immensely large it was, Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah feared that the sheer size of the kitab would scare people away, because it wouldn't quite be a kitab that could be taught in a madrasa setting. But the thing was that Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah knew that there were many points in the kitab that did need further clarity and expounding upon. So he decided to write another explanation of his original Bidayatul Mubtadi. This short explanation took 13 years to complete, but it came out as intended as being only a few volumes, making it easier to study and teach, and he named this kitab Al-Hidaayah fi Sharh Bidayat al-Mubtadi, or simply Al-Hidaayah for short, which translates as the guidance. After the completion of Hidaayah, this kitab was so accepted amongst the ulama that it became an integral part of the studies of all Hanafi ulama. Because what was unique about this kitab is that the rulings contained within it are those that the fatwa of the madhab is upon. Because while there may exist differing rulings from various Hanafi fuqaha, but the chosen view that the Hanafi madhab upon is one, and that is what Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah had compiled in one central place. So accepted was this kitab that it earned Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah the title of Sahibul Hidaayah, or Sahib Hidaayah as is said in Urdu. This was an Imam being named after his kitab rather than a kitab being named after an Imam. The reason for this title of Sahibul Hidaayah was twofold. Firstly, because Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah was the author of Al-Hidaayah. And secondly, because it made Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah a means of guidance for the world. And since that day, Hanafi ulama have tirelessly referenced Hidaayah in their research and fatwa. What is more than this is that numerous lengthy commentaries were written on Hidaayah by the various Hanafi ulama over the ages, which amounts to well over 50 different shuruhat. In fact, this kitab reached such a high degree of acceptance that even the ulama from other madhahib, such as Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani Rahimahullah of the Shafi'i madhab, wrote a kitab in support of Hidaayah to reference the hadith referred to in the kitab. Because being a book of fiqh, it focused on delivering the rulings of the deen rather than delving into the references of the ahadith used. So Imam Ibn Hajar Rahimahullah, like Imam al-Zayla'i Rahimahullah, wrote these books to try and reference each of the ahadith that was the source of the fatwa that the madhab was upon on those particular issues. Never had a book of fiqh from any of the four madhahib reached the level of acclaim and acceptance that Al-Hidaayah has. And that is why up until this day, it is a standard kitab that is taught in every Darul Ulum around the world. Imam Al-Margheenaani Rahimahullah lived the remainder of his life out in Samarkand and passed away in the year 593 after Hijrah, and he was buried there. May Allah reward him for his efforts in making the deen easy for us and grant us the tawfiq to follow the guidance. آمين يا رب العالمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.